Yes, and also joining us right now, also in the news, David Martosko from the Daily Caller. He's the executive editor there. And, of course, the Daily Caller famously broke the story about a week before the election, last week of October. He broke the story that Senator Bob Menendez had been taking frequent trips down to the Dominican Republic. The story has played out quite a bit now. There was a large focus on this fundraiser that was paid for these trips. Ultimately, Senator Menendez paid back this donor for a bunch of money that he claims he forgot. It got lost in the shuffle, you know. But there was another part of this story, and that was that when in the Dominican, Senator Menendez frequented a house of prostitution and was with certain prostitutes down there who appeared in the story from the Daily Caller. Now, this last week, the Washington Post put out a story with the headlines that these prostitutes say that they lied. They completely falsified the story to the Daily Caller, and Senator Menendez now believes that he is being vindicated. So we've brought David Martosko on here to tell us what's going on here. Now, again, the Daily Caller and you, David, have your byline on a lot of these stories. It sounds to me, if I read the headlines right, you owe the Washington Post a big apology, not to mention Senator Menendez. Explain to me why you don't.
Well, actually, the Washington Post owes us an apology. Here's the deal. We interviewed two women from the Dominican Republic who said they were paid to have sex with the senator. We put their interviews on camera. We actually showed the public the interviews. On Monday of this week, a woman in the Dominican Republic swore out an affidavit saying, I made up accusations that I slept with the senator. The Washington Post and a lot of other media outlets have jumped to the conclusion, including ABC News, by the way, have jumped to the conclusion that this woman was one of the women we spoke to.
Was she?
I don't believe she is. The problem is it's impossible to know because the woman is kind of a ghost. She didn't show up to her own press conference. She's not available for interviews. Her lawyer won't provide her. She, as far as we're concerned, there's no evidence that she exists almost. And the interview she described in her affidavit bears no resemblance at all to the one we conducted. She didn't mention the Daily Caller in the affidavit at all. She described being paid to discredit three men, the senator, this fundraiser of his at whose house the hooker sex parties allegedly occurred, and then the cousin of that fundraiser, who's a very prominent politician down there, who was also accused of partaking in the prostitution fund. So she said she was paid to embarrass three men. The third man, the politician, never came up at our interviews at all. I never knew he existed until 2 months later. The second man, the fundraiser, we showed these women pictures of the fundraiser and said, do you know this guy? And they said, no, I have no idea who that is. And then the senator they identified as having been a client. There are many other inconsistencies with this. So ABC News, which says now that they interviewed the same women we did, and I think they're probably right, has also jumped to the conclusion that the woman who swore out the affidavit was one of those women. But they don't know. They can't possibly know because the woman who swore out the affidavit hasn't spoken to anyone.
All right, let me ask you a couple of follow-up questions.
Sure. When
you're doing investigative reporting like this, and somebody makes a really serious charge, like these women allegedly have, one of the things you do as a reporter is you say, okay, we can't prove the big thing. It's just it's her word against the senator's word. But is there any credibility to other aspects of the story? In other words, are you able to verify other parts of their story so that what their whole narrative seems to have some credibility? Were you able to do that in your initial reporting?
Yes, we were. One of the elements of what the women told us was the time frame of all this. They said, look, this happened around Easter of 2012, the episode we're talking about. And they, these particular women, there's no reason to believe that they had sex with the senator more than once. There's no reason to believe that any of the prostitutes were repeat, appearances. But these particular women said, look, we were promised $500 to sleep with the senator. He only paid us $100. It happened over Easter. We obtained flight records for the private jet of Solomon Melhen, the wealthy donor who's been flying the guy around. And the flight records confirmed that his aircraft was in the Dominican Republic that weekend, and that prior to going to the Dominican Republic, it did a takeoff from Teterboro Airport in New Jersey, which is about 20 miles from where Senator Menendez grew up and lives, when he's back in New Jersey anyway. And also we got a hold of Menendez's public schedule, which, frankly, not surprisingly, had no events at all through the entirety of the whole.
So you thought there were elements to the story that you could verify in other ways, right?
That's correct.
Even if you couldn't verify the major claim.
Right, and frankly, they said it was Easter weekend. If we found, obviously, if we found that Senator Menendez was, at a soup kitchen on Easter Sunday serving meals to the homeless,
right, you've got no story.
Nonsense,
All right, let me just ask
and to be clear, we found nothing at all that contradicted their stories.
All right, let me ask you just one other question. FBI has looked into this. They find no evidence. Washington Post says, look, we think one of the women has recanted their story. ABC News had a crack at this story and decided not to go forward because they didn't think it had the ring of credibility. Why should we believe the Daily Caller? I just want to make sure that we understand why you stand by the story.
Well, now with the benefit of 3 or 4 months of looking backward, we're standing by the story partially because we believe it's true, and partially because there are other things that have come out that now, since then, that tend to support the story. We interviewed in late February, published a story on February 24th. We interviewed at great length and multiple interviews an American call girl who says that Menendez was a former client of hers. She says that among the circle of women that she knows who are these high-priced, $300 to $1,000 an hour call girls, she says that among that circle, Menendez was known as quite the hobbyist. He did this a lot. She said that he sees a lot of girls. And and she also told us about a Ukrainian model who, again, lots of elements of this we've confirmed independently, who was on the aircraft with the senator and Melchan, allegedly, and whose role it was to procure girls in the Dominican Republic for the two men to participate in their festivities with.
Well, we're going to have to leave it right there, but interesting stuff.
Yeah, David, thanks for coming on, and we're going to continue watching this at the pages of the Daily Caller and at the Washington Post. David, really fast, is it true that the Washington Post changed that story that they printed without actually giving any attribution to the changes?
That's correct. Initially, in their first story, they said flat out, the two women, who
definitively saying it was the women who were in your video.
Women, and then later they just said, "Oh, well, there were two women in the video." Not they sneakily, quietly changed that story. No attribution at all. I should note that just this week they've done away with the position of ombudsman with the Washington Post, so nobody's checking this stuff.
All right, thank you, David. Appreciate it. David Martosko from the Daily Caller.